By the end of this video, you are going to know the 10 best low water houseplants. I know that some of us tend to overwater our plants, but if you're like me and you find that your plants are often a bit too dry by the time that you get around to watering them, then this video is for you. I'm going to show you the 10 best low water houseplants, plants that can go many weeks or even months without water. So if you're someone who's really busy and you've always got a lot going on and you forget about watering the plants sometimes, or if you've just got so many plants in your house that it's hard to keep track of when you watered them all, I'm going to show you some great options that are going to be easy and you're not going to have to worry about at all. Or if you've just got some spots in your house where you want plants, but they're hard to reach or hard to get to water, like a hanging plant or something on a shelf or behind a couch, whatever it is, I will show you some great stuff for spaces like that as well. And you're definitely going to want to watch until the end on this one because I've saved a great plant for last. This is one of my favorite plants to grow inside. There are so many different types of this plant, many of which flower with really beautiful, fragrant flowers. But most importantly, they don't need much water and they are super easy to take care of. All right, let's get started. First up, we have got the crown of thorns, which is a very interesting and unique looking plant. And no surprise here, it is native to Madagascar, which seems to be where a lot of these very interesting, weird looking houseplants come from. So I've said before, I've got to get over there to Madagascar. So let me know if you want to go on a trip to Madagascar with me. But anyways, the crown of thorn plant is super cool looking because it obviously has thorns and is very cactus-like, but it also has beautiful bright green leaves. As it gets large, it looks really like a small tree that has leaves, but then has a cactus as the trunk. They also have really nice, brightly colored flowers, and if you keep them in a bright spot, they'll bloom, most of the year. The blooms are generally red, yellow, or pink, but there are also some that are multicolored, and they look almost like tie-dye. There's one that's a mix of white and red, which I think is my favorite of them all. And the reason why I'm including them on this list, they need very little water. When they're inside, if you forget to water them for a little while, they're going to be just fine. So there you have it. That is the crown of thorns, which is definitely an awesome low water plant. But if you want a plant that's not, completely covered in thorns, I'll show you another great low water plant right now. And if you haven't, please subscribe to the channel because I've got a lot of great ideas and I have a bunch of great videos coming soon, including some interviews I'm going to be doing with some local growers and farmers. So stay tuned for that. Thank you guys. I love you guys. Next, we are talking about the ZZ plant, which is overall one of the easiest houseplants of all. These are one of the rare plants that can handle both low water and low light, which makes them ideal for growing indoors. I had a friend who once accidentally left a ZZ plant in the trunk of his car for about 2 months and it survived. It had no water and no light at all for a couple months. And, it was definitely not looking great, but it was alive. So that just shows how tough these ZZ plants really are. So the ZZ plant grows dark green or purple, waxy, shiny, smooth leaves that really give the plant a very elegant kind of look. And they also have these tuberous kind of bulbs under the soil that store water very well, which makes them very drought tolerant. So when grown indoors, they only need to be watered very infrequently. So while the ZZ is a great houseplant that needs very little water and can be put basically anywhere indoors, it does grow fairly slowly. So next up, I'm going to show you a low water houseplant that not only grows quite quickly, but it is also edible and medicinal. So let's take a look at that. All right, so I'm sure that many of you have heard of aloe vera and have likely even grown it before, but I still felt strongly that it absolutely needed to have a spot on this list. I think that aloe is a really very special plant that is often taken for granted because I think a lot of people don't realize how good it is for your skin and what a potent healing effect that it really has. If you have any sort of skincare routine at all, then you have got to be growing aloe and using it as a moisturizer. To think that some company could make some kind of weird concoction with chemicals and all kind of stuff in it that would be a better moisturizer than what Mother Nature has already created for us, that's crazy. That's just crazy to think that any product you buy could be better than aloe or, something natural. So that's just crazy. And Mother Nature is always perfect. Never forget that. So aloe vera is very good for your skin and very effective at treating acne, psoriasis, wound healing, and what I use it for most personally is for sunburns. I started to find that using using the aloe vera and coconut oil would basically make a sunburn go away within a day. And then as I started using it more, I realized I wasn't even getting sunburned at all anymore. So I personally think that if you use aloe regularly as a topical, it's not only good for treating sunburn, but it will actually make you less likely to get sunburn in the first place. So I got a bit off topic here with all the medicinal uses of aloe, but let's not forget the original point, which is that it's a great low water plant that's easy to grow and it grows fast as well. So if you want just a tremendous plant that you can grow inside and water like once a month, you're gonna need aloe vera for sure. So that is aloe vera, and so far I've talked about pretty much small plants. So next I'm going to show you a great low water tree that can get very large indoors. Okay, so next up we have got the spineless yucca, which I think is another underappreciated houseplant. When it comes to really cool looking, easy to grow, low water houseplants that over time can grow into a decent sized tree, there's hardly any better option than the spineless yucca. These plants, they're fairly slow growing, so if you just want a small houseplant, you can get a small one for probably, $20, and it'll be years before it really takes up much space. Or if you want a larger houseplant that's more like a tree to begin with, then you can buy one that's already pretty large for, $100, $200, depending on how large you want to start off with. These are, they're one of those houseplants that look very nice at drastically different sizes. They do need a lot of sunlight though, so just make sure it's right in the window and then water it like once a month, and I think you'll find that it's very easy to take care of. Next up, I'm going to show you what I think is one of the best and easiest succulents to grow indoors. So let's take a look at that. So now we are talking about the jade plant, which is really one of the very few succulents that I would personally even try to grow indoors. I think that there's a big misconception about succulents being easy to care for and being a good beginner level houseplant. For the most part, succulents are actually quite hard to grow indoors, and many of them have very fragile leaves that can easily fall off or rot off if they're overwatered just a little bit or if they're not in enough light. But with the jade plant, I found that as long as it's near a window and it gets at least some light on it, then they really are very easy to take care of. This is also one of those succulents that can grow pretty large over time. And I have one that was just a single stalk, probably, 4 or 5 inches tall when I got it. And now 5 years later, it's basically grown into a decent sized shrub or bush kind of shape that it's probably 2 feet wide and like 3 feet tall. And, you know, as they get big and the lower stems get exposed more at the bottom, they really start to look very beautiful. And like everything on this list, they're very forgiving if you barely ever water them. All right, so we have talked about some great low water plants, but so far we haven't gone over any of the lowest water plant of all, cactus. And I've got a great one to show you right now. I think for most of us, when we think about plants that need very little water, the first thing that comes to mind is cactus. There are no plants that are better suited for surviving drought than cacti. So if you want a plant inside your home that's truly going to need barely any water at all, look no further than the Peruvian apple cactus. Now, I'm sure there's several types of cacti that can grow indoors, but the Peruvian apple cactus is definitely my favorite. I think they look particularly nice inside, and I have experience growing them inside and know that they work very well indoors. So what I did when I was growing one of these is I would put it outside for half the year and then bring it inside for half the year. So that's what I would recommend when growing cacti inside. Put it outside from, you know, April to October, and then bring it inside for the rest of the year. During the 6 months that I would have it inside, I'd water it literally like twice, maybe 3 times. But, you know, once every couple months is all that it needs. If you have a super bright window that's facing south, you could grow it inside year round, but if not, I would just put it outside for at least some part of the year, some part of the summer. Just make sure that when you bring it outside in the spring, you don't just put it immediately into full sun. Ease it into more and more light for a few weeks until it's able to take the full sun without getting burnt. Because if you just put it directly into full sun, it's gonna get actually burnt from the sun. Even though it's a cactus, it will not be adjusted to that much light. So you gotta kind of ease it in. And I think that's the way to do the Peruvian apple cactus or any cactus inside, is to put it outside for part of the year. But at least you'll have it inside, you know, for 6 months or even 9 months. But just put it outside for at least 3 months. So there you have it. That is the Peruvian apple cactus. And next up, I'm going to show you another classic low water houseplant. The snake plant is known universally as one of the easiest houseplants of all, and it truly is. They are really beautiful plants that are actually very unique, and they really look awesome in any room. And you can grow them in any room. You know, they can be in a very bright spot, they can be in a super low light, dark spot. So you can really put them anywhere and they'll be just fine. And they do need barely any water. I think it's best to water a snake plant about once a month, but even once every 2 months would be totally fine. They'll just probably barely ever grow at all if they're, you know, barely ever getting any water, but, you know, they'll still be fine, and that's totally okay. There are also many different types of snake plants. There is just a couple, the Zeylanica and the Laurentii, that are most popular, but there's a bunch of different really cool ones. There is the starfish Sansevieria, the whale fin and the shark fin, the Whitney Sansevieria, the Fernwood Mikado, the Moonshine Sansevieria, and a bunch of other great ones. So if you've grown snake plants before and you know how easy they are to take care of, but you don't want the same old snake plants that everyone's been growing for years, there are a bunch of great options. Next up, I'm going to show you a very unique, very odd looking, easy to grow, low water plant. Now we have got another great, very easy, low water houseplant, the pencil cactus. So it gets its name because of the way that as it branches out, the new growth comes off of the main branches in clusters of green sticks that are, about the size of pencils. And what's cool about these is that the green stem is able to photosynthesize. So they don't really actually need leaves. They have a truly very unique look that brings this kind of strange, geometrically interesting look to your plant collection. These plants do need a lot of light, so make sure you put them right in your brightest window. And there is a super cool type of pencil cactus called the fire sticks pencil cactus that turns bright red at the top when it's in enough light. These are particularly beautiful and they're really a head-turning plant. So definitely get one of these if you can. They turn very red at the top and then kind of go to orange, yellow, back to green. And I've heard people describe them as looking almost like coral. And I think that's an accurate description. And they really are particularly nice, the fire sticks pencil cactus. So these plants can get very large if they're growing in enough light, and as they get bigger, they really look quite spectacular. Just make sure that if it gets too big and you need to trim them back, either bring them outside or put down a sheet or a tarp around it, because there is a sap in them that once you cut them is going to pour out and it's going to get everywhere. And the sap is actually quite toxic and it can burn your skin, and it's especially bad if you get it in your eyes. So wear gloves and be super careful if you have to cut them back. But if you're not going to cut them back, it's unlikely that the sap is ever going to come out. So it's not something you need to worry about regularly. It's just, when you are really cutting the plant. But the sap is also toxic to animals, so be aware of that. And, other than that, you don't really need to worry about the sap. Just put it up out of the way, put it somewhere where you're not going to bump into it, and the sap will likely never come out. So it's not an issue, and these are just an awesome, awesome plant. And so while these are maybe not the best low water houseplant to have if you have young children or pets, next up I'm going to show you another amazing low water houseplant that is completely non-toxic for pets. Next up, we have got the Ponytail Palm, which is definitely one of my favorite houseplants of all. They are not only non-toxic, easy to care for, and need very infrequent watering, but they're also one of those houseplants that look great when they're really small, they look great when they're kind of medium-sized, and they look great when they're really large. At any size, they look super cool, and if you keep one for many years, they can get quite large. Especially if there's multiple heads and it starts to branch out as it grows, they look very peculiar, honestly. It's something that you could imagine seeing in a Dr. Seuss book or on some alien planet in a Star Wars movie or something. They're just awesome, and as long as you don't overwater them, you can just keep these things alive forever. I've had one for a few years now, and I'll be honest, there's been many times where I really neglected it, when I was moving and it kind of got put in a corner somewhere. So there has been times where it was outside in bright sunlight. There's been times when it's been inside right in the window. There's been times where it's been inside in low light. And through all of this, it just keeps growing and it's been totally fine. So this is another plant that you could put outside. You could put outside for the summer so it's getting some bright sunlight, which will really speed up the growth rate, and then bring it back inside for the winter. But if you want to keep it inside year round, that's also going to be totally fine. And it's just an exceptional houseplant that anyone can grow if you water it about once a month. So now we are arriving at the final plant on the list, and I have got a really great one for you guys. So without further ado, let's check that out right now. We have made it to the end, and we are talking about Hoyas, which are absolutely one of the greatest types of houseplants. First of all, there are over 500 types of Hoyas. So there are many different types, and a lot of them look nothing short of spectacular. There are some with round leaves, some with long, thin leaves, some with oval-shaped leaves, some that are dark green, some that are variegated, and all of them flower. The Hoya flowers are really elegant, waxy, pale cream colored or pink, and they grow in these very symmetrical clusters that I just love the look of. And on top of all of that, they are often very fragrant and have some very nice scents. So I think a lot of people just don't realize how drought tolerant these are and how forgiving they are for someone who doesn't have all of their plants on an exact watering schedule or sometimes forgets to water. I personally learned just how drought resistant these are at an old job that I had taking care of plants in office buildings. And there was one office that had a Hoya in one room that we had forgotten about when we took over the account. And it probably sat in that room for at least 3 months. It could have been even longer, but it went at least 3 months without any water. And so when we finally found it, it was still alive. And once we started watering again, it quickly started growing back, and within a couple months, it was looking good again. So don't let anyone tell you that Hoyas can't handle low water conditions, because they certainly can. And like I said before, there are so many awesome different types of Hoyas. Some of my favorites are the Hoya obovata, the Hoya carrii, which has the heart-shaped leaves and makes for a perfect Valentine's Day gift, the compacta, which is also known as the Hindu rope or the Buddha rope, and it has a really very unique look, the Hoya wyeatii, the Hoya curtisii, and the Hoya ellipticale, which has leaves that they look almost like alligator skin, and they're just awesome. There are just a few, common types of Hoyas that we generally see most often, but all of these other types are just as easy to grow, and they can handle just as low water. So if you're looking for new houseplants to try out, definitely get some of these Hoyas that I've just mentioned. Hoyas are also easy to grow from cuttings, and the leaves are very sturdy. So this is a plant that you can feel comfortable ordering online and feel confident that they'll show up in good shape. So go out and get yourself one of these Hoyas or any of these low water plants that I put on the list, and take them home and don't water them.